What if they're not what I expected? What if I'm not what they expected? Anyways.
This part right here, this is a scene I've brought up countless times. Not only do we see a more anxious side of Ratchet, but there's certainly that sense of foreshadowing. Hey everyone, it's me Vivi, and welcome back to some more Ratchet and Clank. As Ratchet anxiously seems to point out here, what if they're not what he expected? Or what if he's not what they expected him to be? Ratchet's feelings towards meeting the Lombaxes here could potentially open the door to another deep storyline, one of which being Ratchet facing the hardest of trials. We know Ratchet as this kind of Lombax with a big heart, a renowned hero to the galaxy. However, that doesn't mean every Lombax out there shares the same values, morals, or principles. To word this differently, we don't know much about the other Lombaxes. Sure, we've met Rivet. Turns out she's Ratchet's dimensional counterpart. Well, maybe that's what we're meant to believe. We also can't forget Alistair Azimuth, who was misguided by his own deep regret from the past. He almost risked the galaxy, trying to rewind time using the Great Clock. He sacrificed himself after finally realizing what he was doing was a mistake. So far, when it comes to the Lombaxes, we've been simply aware of the surface level. We don't know what lies deep within their society, wherever that may be. Ever since the start of the Future Saga, Tools of Destruction in 2007, the Lombaxes were known as these very tech-savvy individuals, or how Emperor Percival Tachyon put it in Tools of Destruction, renowned engineers. Examples we can think of: we have omni-wrenches, sentient spaceships, nano-weaponry like the Alpha Disruptor capable of destroying starships, biological tech even, such as needing an actual Lombax to activate said tech. Having brought up Alistair Azimuth, his regret had to do with sharing their tech with Emperor Percival Tachyon. Alistair believed entrusting Tachyon with their tech would have helped protect the galaxy from harm. That, sadly, didn't end up happening. He was exiled. Tachyon actually ended up using their own tech against them. Having discovered his race being banished by the Lombaxes a long time ago, Tachyon eventually sought out to bring his people back. There's one device the Lombaxes were known for in particular, that being the Dimensionator. According to Lore Entry 8 in Rift Apart, Lombax named Mags, who we've never met before, converted this device into a helmet, one which could run on voice command. That's exactly what we saw in Tools of Destruction. Tachyon shouted out the Kragmites and pulled out the trigger to open a portal to whatever dimension the Lombaxes banished the Kragmites to. Listening to the Lorbs more, Mags eventually realized why he was tasked to map every single dimension. They were planning to escape Tachyon. Taking into account the timeline of these events, we'd like to believe this handled version, or anything similar to it, is what the Lombaxes used to banish the Kragmites a long time ago. One thing which caught me by surprise, or maybe not, I mean it's Clank we're talking about, he managed to, I guess, reconvert the helmet Dimensionator into a handled one. Looking at Into the Nexus from 2013, the helmet version was replicated by Vendra and Nefton Prague. Long story short with these two, they thought they were befriending the Nethers only to realize that it would all backfire. The real Dimensionator was later retrieved, and the real one was later used to send the Nethers back. The real one breaks, Clank decides to take it, and here we are now with Rift Apart. All in all, focusing back on the Lombaxes, they've always been perceived as this very kind-spirited race. Of course, one in particular went through a certain hurdle which almost risked the galaxy, but from the outside, they've always been looked at as a race who just easily gets along with others of similar nature. Tools of Destruction actually pointed out how the Lombaxes are noble and courageous. Now that the chances of visiting the Lombaxes seems higher and higher, I mean Ratchet certainly seemed to have made up his mind on Ordolis, even asking Clank if he'd join him. Now that this seems more and more likely, the whole noble and courageous thing might not be as accurate as we'd like to believe. At this point, these characteristics feel very superficial, and that's simply because we've never seen other Lombaxes other than the ones we're already familiar with. Sure, there's some good apples out there, but chances are you'll find a few bad ones. From the surface, you can already tell it's bad or rotten if it ever even reaches that point. Applying this analogy to the Lombax race, we might stumble on an individual, or individuals, who already for some unknown reason are rotten from the surface. The saying of evil is not born, it's created. I mean, we can only speculate what made them this way. Although the Lombaxes we've met so far are courageous and noble, we can't just say the same applies to others. Most importantly, we've never seen the Lombax dimension. Apart from the glimpse we saw in Tools of Destruction, we don't know who runs the place, or what rules the Lombaxes follow over there. Some Lombaxes over there might not be so noble. They could be rogue, opposed, or just completely evil, whatever it is you'd like to call it. Absolutely disregarding any visitors, especially when it comes to the Dimensionator. Just because Ratchet and Rivet are Lombaxes doesn't mean they'll easily be welcomed with open arms. And this is where Ratchet's feelings could feel warranted. Compared to Rivet, we know just a tiny bit more about Ratchet's background. He's the son of Kaidan, the keeper of the Dimensionator, the one who helped the Lombaxes escape after Tachyon's wrath. From the Lorbs, Kaidan could have perhaps been part of the Council. If such is the case, then surely he's made a name for himself. But not everyone might have agreed with his practices or way of thinking. That factor alone might result in another Lombax completely resenting Ratchet due to his bloodline. Assuming the Lombax dimension's flow of time is similar to Ratchet's, enough time must have passed for the young ones to grow into adults. Whatever environment they grew up in, be it toxic or unhealthy, it caused them to grow up corrupt, enough not to even think straight. Ratchet, being the son of Kaidan, might be resented even if he's portrayed as a hero in the other dimension. Rules from the outside do not apply in their dimension. This individual doesn't care about Ratchet. Heck, they might not even believe a word Ratchet tells them. All they see is a tainted image of Kaidan. Now, why would they despise Kaidan? Could be due to a multitude of reasons. Perhaps they believed Kaidan risked the lives of many Lombaxes and acted like a coward. Quite frankly, we ourselves don't know much of Kaidan. All we knew about him was that he was Alistair's best friend and the keeper of the Dimensionator. If not for Kaidan, Ratchet might feel resented because he was never there in their dimension. The Lombaxes realize one way or another that Ratchet was a hero, but a certain someone or a group even might belittle him, and not being here when they needed someone like him the most. Just because the Lombaxes escaped doesn't mean their new dimension was threat-proof. Something could have caused a major upheaval over there, enough to cost lives even. This other Lombax, completely despising Ratchet for being absent from his own race, just loses it, and the whole thing transitions into a mid-game boss fight. Heck, that'd be interesting to see. I can already picture a certain Lombax with gut-wrenching demeanor, mixed in with a little, maybe, snarkiness. That type of character. Just imagine that type of character interacting with Ratchet. As for Rivet, if we're looking at her being playable at least to a certain extent, I could imagine the Dimensionator glitching and causing all of them to get separated for a short while. Ending up in different, let's call it, Lombax factions. Each faction making our characters face a certain challenge. In Rivet's case, she might uncover a certain truth. Not that some Lombaxes are bad type of thing, but more about herself. We don't know much of her either. Rift apart looking at the Lorbs, some might believe she was left behind, grew up in her dimension alone, and eventually became part of the Resistance. As mentioned earlier, Rift Apart makes us believe these two are counterparts. Sure they are. Sure they might seem that way, but perhaps not in a literal sense. Yeah, they grew up in different dimensions and just so happen to have similar heroic attributes, but we can't deny what Mags stated in that Lorb entry. Whoever is listening to this entry, that means they were left behind and did not make it. If this is Rivet, chances are she actually originates from Ratchet's dimension, but never knew about it. This could all change once a certain Lombax starts recognizing her. We could find out about a certain connection she has, but this makes me think back to that video I made, Rivet being Alistair's daughter. As for why Alistair was out of the loop, if this were ever to be the case, it could stem from personal reasons from her mother. What's even more sad to think about, Rivet would realize her father almost risked the galaxy. Not to mention the fact Ratchet faced him before his final moment. She could find out about these things via let's say, imagine a prophet, Lombax. She might not believe them at first, but eventually she'll realize something. That actually sounds like a very cool, interesting concept. Like Onin from the Jack series, but just imagine a Lombax instead with similar divinity. Gary also deserves some credit. Do recall him predicting what Ratchet and Kit were up to next. If not for Rivet uncovering a certain truth, she might not even get separated. She might be by Ratchet's side throughout, or will try to. Ratchet, if we completely remove the whole being hated on plot, he might get praised instead. Why? Because he's the son of Caden and a hero to the galaxy he came from. Because of this, Lombaxes might not even bat an eye when meeting Rivet. That might cause some self-confidence issues for Rivet. That could be another challenge she could face. Vivi, hold on, what about Kit and Clank? Two scenarios. These two end up separated and team up until they find Ratchet and Rivet. Clank and Kit gameplay, them being together, is what I'm thinking about. Two sentient robots working together would certainly bring a fresh new twist to the series. If not for the separation part, I'd simply imagine them being alongside Rivet and Ratchet, the classic route, simply being there for them. Last but not least, another challenge we can't deny is whether or not Ratchet and Rivet would decide to stay with the Lombaxes. If anything, the Lombaxes might even refuse these two to leave due to maybe their insecurity or internalized fear. They might look at Ratchet and Rivet as assets and absolutely refuse to let them go. All in all, what type of challenge could you imagine our gang facing in the Lombax dimension? Could you imagine the idea of, say, an evil Lombax society or something of sort? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments section below. As always, thank you to my patrons for helping the channel out, and thank you for watching. Like always, you can call me Vivi, and until next time.